achieved.
So I would say I've been fairly consistent. Since 2011, when my show started, I don't believe I have missed a single UFC event when it comes to posting predictions. I've covered Strikeforce in that span. I've dabbled in Bellator and WEC. I even did some WSOF events, but I've never missed a UFC event. And one of the things, the issues is the consistency in which we get UFC events. And right now, we are in a very heavy schedule. We had 9 consecutive weekends. We had a week off, and then we're right back into a long stretch of cards. And I love UFC, and I love mixed martial arts as much as the next person. Probably, I wouldn't say more than a lot of people, but I do enjoy it. Obviously, I'm in that type of business where you have to like it. But at the same time, there's a level of burnout. And I think that exists for both for people in my industry and in just for fans. It's like there's a card. I know some of my friends that are fans. There's a card every single weekend, and sometimes they just don't care. They go, okay, I'll catch the next one. I would like to see the UFC try and find that happy balance between events and breaks. 2 to 3, 4 events in a row, and then a week or 2 off. And what I find personally is that anticipation level. I do miss it when it's a Saturday and there's no fighting, but then I start anticipating that next card, and I look forward to it. I go, okay, we've been a couple weeks without fights or a week without fights. I cannot wait to start analyzing footage, breaking down fights, looking at stats, trying to establish who's going to win. And then when that fight night hits, it's huge. It's amazing. Every single fight means that much more to me. Versus when we get in that middle of that stretch, when you get to event 5 and 6 of 9, it's like, I basically am spending the week preparing. And then the night of the fights, I'm already looking forward to the next fights because I'm getting ready for those ones because that's what my time frame is. Again, this is something I do as a hobby in addition to my other hobbies, in addition to my job, which is incredibly taxing as a full-time high school teacher. So it's one of those things that I love fights, but I'd like to find, I love events, I love cards, I love consistency, but at the same time, I'd like to break once in a while from the madness that is the UFC's rigorous schedule. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And this episode of the show, we are breaking the April 27th event, which will take place in Sunrise, Florida. Now, originally, this appeared to be UFC on ESPN 8. But then it's been announced that this card will be shown on ESPN Plus. So this was supposed to be UFC on ESPN 3, but then it's transitioned. It's going to be on UFC on ESPN Plus, which makes it a different event. So either way, the main event is Jacare versus Hermansson, which should be a good card. We have 6 main card predictions I'll be breaking down for you. I'm coming off a fairly decent showing at the last event. I went 8-3. Which is a positive show, and I feel like I've slowly been finding my stride. I lost one significant fight, which is the Marcin Tybura fight, which cost me. But overall, I've had a lot of success. I had a lot of success in that card. I got a lot of things right, which I was very fortunate to pick up. And I slowly feel like I'm dragging myself out of a slump. I've had a couple of events after a bit of a downturn. And again, a slump in my stretch, my opinion was when I was barely winning more fights than I was losing. I was hitting 500, slightly below. And then you look at it, I went 7-6, 8-5, then 8-3. It's like hopefully I continue that stretch and I start to pile wins up. I also snapped a 4-fight losing streak in main events, so that was definitely a tough pill to swallow. But thankfully, Alistair Overeem got the job done. My bet packs will be for sale. I believe this is the last one in the subscription pack, so you'll be able to re-up next for the next show, which will be going down in May. We've got 6 pretty awesome fights I'm looking forward to predicting. All my preliminary predictions, as per usual, available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so make sure you check them out. And let's get to our first main card prediction. The opening fight of the night transpires in the UFC's lightweight division as Roosevelt of the Predator Roberts, undefeated at 7-0, takes on the debuting young lion Thomas Gifford with a current record of 14 wins and 7 defeats. Now, Roberts is making his second UFC outing as he's undefeated, and he was the first man to submit Daryl Horcher in a very impressive performance when we last saw him. For Thomas Gifford, he is debuting. He's undefeated in his last 5. He has a no contest mixed in there as well. He has just one loss in his last 8, which was preceded by a 4-6 stretch where he really struggled through a 10-fight tenure where he was very inconsistent. Very early in his career, so he seems to have righted the ship and got himself noticed and picked up by the UFC. Now, both guys are very tall for the lightweight division. Again, Roberts stands 6'2", Gifford stands 6'1". 3-inch reach advantage for Gifford. Roberts is the younger man by 2 years. Now, normally either one of these individuals would have a length advantage over their opponent, so a major edge in this fight could go to the fighter that adapts quicker and is able to come up with a strategy that deals with this lack of an advantage more effectively. Now, for Gifford, this is his first major organizational appearance. He's never been in Bellator or Strikeforce or any of those other organizations that exist out there or did exist. Didn't fight in the Contender Series, and it's worth noting he has as many losses as Roberts has pro fights, so he has an experience advantage there, at least when it comes to quantity. Now, he was offered a short notice fight by the UFC not that long ago, but he recognized he couldn't make weight, and as a result, he turned it down, which leads me to believe he has a bit of a head on his shoulders. He's making some good decisions. Now, when you look at his record, which is always important to do when you have a debuting fighter, his last 2 wins came over the same man, who has a combined record of 11-3. So you take those 2 losses to Gifford off, he's 11-1. That's pretty good competition. Prior to that, he had 2 fights against fighters with a combined record of 9-7, so a little more appropriate for a regional level fighter. Now, all 14 of his wins have come by finish. That by itself is fantastic. 12 of those wins have come by submission. Also very good. You look at that and you go, okay, by itself, that looks good. And then we start getting into some more concerning things. He has 11 victories in the opening round, which people go, that's great. First round finisher, fantastic. It's not always a positive. When you look at the next stats, he is 3-6 outside of the opening round and 0-3 in fights that go to the third round. He has suffered 2 losses by knockout, 3 losses by submission, and 2 on the scorecards. So he has a very limited window for success as far as that's concerned, and that's on the regional scene. So when you take it a step with the UFC, these things get magnified. Now, for Roberts, it's a much smaller sample size. 3 wins by knockout, 4 submission wins, 5 in the first round, 2 in the second round. So he doesn't exactly have a long fight history under his belt either, but at least he's had a little bit better competition with his fight in the Contender Series and in the UFC. Now, Gifford, when you look at what he brings to the table, he can be taken down. He seems very comfortable off his back. He likes chokes. He will work his guillotine, a guillotine if an opponent sticks his head in. He's got a good sprawl and he's got those long limbs set up a Darce choke. But in his last defeat, he spent a lot of time on his back, and he was way too willing to accept the position. And if he can't get the submission, that's a troublesome scenario to deal with. Now, how does he fare on the feet is a big question if his guy who's going to give up takedowns, even though he's a good submission fighter. He works a left jab, a straight right. He's not very active, nothing super impressive with his striking. He needs to get the fight to the mat to be successful, and he needs to do so in a dominant position. Now, you look at Roosevelt Roberts. He has 3 wins by guillotine, 1 by rear naked choke, so he loves those chokes. He pursues the submission incredibly aggressively. He will attack them standing, which we saw in his last fight, and he uses his size very well when he does get the fight to the ground, smothering, landing ground and pound, transitioning, and eventually setting up a fight-ending sequence. Now, Roberts' striking, it looked decent against Daryl Horcher. Horcher was expected to have an advantage on the feet, and that was not the case in that fight. We saw Roberts utilize some very hard, low, and body kicks. He will go high as well. His hands are up in good position. He's got a good, solid right hand. He moved away very effectively when under attack. He stayed calm when he was pressured. He was throwing lots of feints to try and draw out his opponent's reactions and making them less comfortable and making them react to him instead of initiating on their own terms. Now, Roberts actually didn't look for a takedown in that fight. His opponent clinched up, engaged him on the wall, and we saw Roberts use his height and leverage to grab the neck and get a very brutal, nasty-looking choke to eventually finish the fight. I think it was a guillotine. Now, Roberts should have a decent advantage on the feet in this matchup, especially with his kicks, dealing with that range. And I would anticipate he could use his striking to drag this fight into round 2 and 3, get ahead on the scorecards, but really make his opponent less effective in those later stages. If Roberts wants the takedown, I think it's there. Gifford can be taken down. I don't know if Gifford can get the takedown on his own. And part of the reason is because he doesn't set up with his hands as well, and he's looking to just dive in kind of nasty, brutish, and just hope it happens. And if he pulls guard, Roberts is on top is not a good thing. If Gifford gives up a takedown willingly to get the fight to the ground, that's not a good thing. It's going to be hard to catch him in a sub. Not impossible, but it's going to be very difficult to catch him in a sub position. Gifford's poor records to the first round also suggests he has a very limited window for success here. And when you magnify that by going to the next level, it becomes even less likely he's going to grab it. Roberts is going to have success on his feet. He's going to hurt him. He's going to tire him out a little in those exchanges. Eventually, he's going to get on top, and my prediction is Roosevelt Roberts to defeat Thomas Gifford by submission. Fight number 2 in the main card transpires in the UFC's bantamweight division as the 8th-ranked Hands of Stone John Lineker, 31 wins and 8 losses, takes on Cory Sandhagen with a current record of 10 wins and 1 loss. Now, this bout was originally scheduled to go down January 19th, with Lineker pulling out with an injury on January 10th. So these guys have been prepping for a while. Sandhagen remained on the card and beat his replacement opponent fairly handily, but nonetheless, these guys have been preparing for each other for a while. So this is certainly a fight that's not your typical matchup as far as prep time and everything else that goes into it. Now, when you look at Lineker, the guy has 1 loss in his last 9 fights. It came via decision to TJ Dillashaw, the former and now much maligned champion. He beat Rob Font, he beat McDonald, he beat John Dodson, he beat Vera, he beat Kelleher. He's got a solid list of guys he's put down in his career. For Sandhagen, he has won 5 in a row. 3-0 in the UFC, TKO over Austin Arnett. He beat Yuri Alcantara. He submitted Mario Batista in his most recent fight. He's put together a nice little run, but this is certainly a step up. Now, looking at these two guys, Sandhagen is 8 inches taller than John Lineker, who's only 5'3". Sandhagen will only have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger fighter by 2 years, and Lineker's almost been out for a year, which is also worth noting. Now, at this point, as far as the physical disparities, Lineker is usually the shorter man. That's why he went down to 125 and just ultimately couldn't keep it going there. So this is nothing new for him. This is not a scenario in which he's going, oh, God, how do I overcome this? He constantly has to overcome this type of length and height issue that he's dealing with in this fight. Now, looking at Sandhagen, on the feet, he utilizes a lot of movement. He moves in and out very well, switches stances. He's very, not unorthodox with his movement, just very unique. Let's call it unique. Good footwork, good head movement, mixes up his techniques very well. Kicks, knees, punches, elbows, body shots, slapping leg kicks. He works it all in cohesion very effectively. He's a high-pace, high-pressure fighter. Now, that doesn't mean he's one of these letter-perfect guys who's just not going to be touched. When he fought Uriel Alcantara, he got buzzed early, caught in a nasty submission that very rarely nearly cost him the fight. And then once he survived it, he went off with his ground and pound and ultimately eventually finished the matchup from the top position. He will work takedowns. He has that nasty, heavy ground and pound. Good submission game as well. He likes those chokes. On the flip side, he's hittable. He's not as conventional with his defense. He's a little bit loose. His hands are down. I said Alcantara buzzed him and hurt him early, and that's a major question mark, especially against Lineker, who only needs one opportunity to put you down. It's also worth noting that Sandhagen has trained with TJ Dillashaw. Now, all things considered, is that relationship something he can draw upon right now with Dillashaw's situation, where he could say, hey, how did you fight Lineker? What did you do to prepare? Is there something, or other coaches maybe that he's more likely to talk to? Either way, there is a relationship there with somebody who has beaten Lineker in the past. Now, when you look at Lineker, he invites the pressure game. He's willing to stand and trade. He likes to crowd you, cut off that cage. He relies on the chin, says, hit me with your best shot, I'll hit you with mine. We're going to see who's still standing here, which is an exciting way to fight. And for the most part, he's been very successful relying on that. Now, you think back to his wins against Rivera and McDonald. He's like, you want to swing with me? Let's go. That's a big factor. I will swing with you, and we'll see how it works out. Now, the cardio, is that a factor? Is that an issue, especially the layoff? He did slow down in the third round against Brian Kelleher. He's incredibly dangerous still, and he got the knockout. And it partly because he delivered so much damage throughout the fight. But again, he can slow down, and if he's not getting ahead and not making those big swings count, that could be an issue. Now, what Lineker does very effectively, he's not nearly as uncalculated as many people would perceive him to be. He, in fact, is a very capable combination striker. He throws those brutal body strikes to set up his attack, and then he'll go to the head. He'll look for the chin. He will brawl, but he throws in combination. He throws flurries. His low stature allows him to crack to the body without much of a level change and then come up over the top with big hooks and big overhands that can really put a lick on his opponent. He also mixes in some hard low kicks, which can serve to slow his opponent down, but everything is meant to set up his power punching. Versus Dillashaw, versus Dodson, versus Vera, even at times versus Kelleher, though, he wasn't nearly as effective. His opponents didn't stand where he could trade with them. They were elusive. They weren't as willing to commit. They mixed things up a little bit, and that was effective. For Sandhagen, that low hands and lack of defense are huge concerns. One shot could change the complexion of the fight. Sandhagen could win almost the entire matchup, and John lands one shot, and this fight is over, and that's certainly a scenario I am concerned about. But I love Sandhagen's movement. He's in, he's out, he's switching things up. He's never showing you the same look. He makes his opponent swing a lot, and that's going to make it hard for Lineker to maintain his output. And the movement's going to make it hard for him to close the gap and cut off the cage. Sandhagen could look for takedowns, certainly an option. Lineker's not easy to take off his feet, and Sandhagen needs to be mindful of the submission game of Lineker, especially that guillotine choke. It could slip in there. Sandhagen at the same time has a submission game of his own he could threaten with. He wants to avoid getting put on his back or making a mistake that winds up in a bad position that could cost him. That's certainly worth paying attention to. If Lineker can't get him out of there, does the pace of Sandhagen wear him out? Does he take over the matchups in round 2 and 3? That's what I'm anticipating here. Lineker's been out for close to a year. He looked a little bit rusty against Vera and went the distance after a 10-month layoff and a broken jaw. Here he's been out for just shy of 12 months. That's a longer break. I think Sandhagen fights smart here. He moves well. He uses that length. He mixes it up. He takes advantage of the plodding style of Lineker. He's not going to let him cut off the cage. He's not going to be in range for those follow-up strikes that Lineker likes to throw in sequence. I think Sandhagen stays active. He moves. It's death through accumulation. It's death through exhaustion. And my prediction is Cory Sandhagen to defeat John Lineker by TKO. Continuing the sequence of action fights, we move to the UFC's light heavyweight division as former title challenger and the 11th ranked Glover Teixeira, with a record of 28 wins and 7 losses, takes on Ion Cutelaba, affectionately known as the Hulk, with a current record of 14 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, these two were also scheduled to face off in January. Cutelaba pulled out. Glover faced Carl Roberson and won that fight. Faced a little adversity. But Glover, you look at what Teixeira has done. The Brazilian has had an impressive career. He fought John Jones in 2014 for the title. It seems like that was yesterday, but at the same time, it's so long ago. He has gone 6-4 since fighting for that title, alternating wins and losses over his last 7 fights, and coming off a submission win over the aforementioned Roberson. Now, for Cutelaba, he has won back-to-back fights. He's 3-2 in the UFC, and ultimately his one most recent loss was a fight against Jared Cannonier, where he was looking very good, and Cannonier kind of just went all crazy on him, and it was a weird scenario. I thought Cutelaba was on the verge of winning that matchup, and he very well could have. Physically, Glover 1 inch taller, he'll have a 1 inch reach advantage, but he is the older man by a marked 14 years. Now, I know in the light heavyweight and heavyweight division, age doesn't mean as much, but still 14 years and pushing 40 is significant. And that's a big question here. How much does Glover have left? He's 39, nearly 40 years old. He's been a pro for 17 years. He's fought for the title. He's fought in main events. He's fought all over the world. How much does he have left to give? How much does he want to give? That's a great question. That's a lot of mileage. That's a lot of damage on Glover. And at what point does that start to show up? How does he win this fight? And how does he win fights in general? Let's take a look at that. Actually, before we even get there, more importantly, let's look at how he loses fights. Where does Glover Teixeira struggle? When you look at his big losses, Rumble Johnson obliterated him. Knocked him in the next week and knocked him out in very short fashion. Alexander Gustafsson battered him pillar to post in a very entertaining fight, but Gustafsson eventually finished him in the late stages of that matchup. Both guys knocked him out. The other sizable losses, you go way back to his Phil Davis loss, which is that post-title fight scenario, and more recently the Cory Anderson loss. Those guys outworked him and utilized wrestling and had a lot of success in those areas. So that's how he loses fight. How does he win fights? Well, again, there's 2 distinct categories for Glover Teixeira as far as how he wins fights in the UFC. He knocks out guys with questionable chins and durability, Rashad Evans, Patrick Cummins, and to a slightly lesser extent, Misha Serkinov. Or he overcomes guys with poor grappling defense. Carl Robertson, Jared Cannonier, and Ovince St. Preux. 2 submissions and a ground-based decision victory. So those are his 2 areas of winning. So again, when we know how guys lose and we know how guys win, that helps us to determine how they're going to fare in this matchup. Glover's a good boxer. He's got good power. He's got above-average wrestling with solid ground and pound and very good submission skills. He's a complete package. It's unfortunate that he didn't make it to the UFC when he was at the height of his game and had to come later on because of visa issues. And he could have been a champion at some point, again, much earlier in his career. Now, his avenues to victory are what we just looked at. In defeats, he's put up goose eggs. He's been soundly defeated. So it's either really one or the other. Either he puts guys, he dominates guys, or he loses fights fairly markedly. Now, where does Ion Cutelaba fit into this? He's got a good wrestling background. He has gone offensive with his ground game. He's tightened things up overall, but ultimately he needs to focus on his defense here. Now, when he fought Antigulov last time at a fight I correctly predicted, he was taken down 3 times in the first round in 8 attempts. All in the first round. He was facing an opponent who was spamming takedown attempts, diving on them, and he kept getting up, and he kept fending them off, and he had a lot of success. Can he defend Glover's takedown attempts? That's a great question. Glover is very good with his takedown, very good with his wrestling. Glover's landed one takedown against Robertson, 1 takedown against Misha, and got to the finish. He landed 3 against Cannonier and got to a decision. He has shown us, and you go back to OSP, take guys down, he can dominate them on the mat. Where can Cutelaba get back up? That's a big question that could really decide this matchup. Now, on the feet, Cutelaba absolutely has power. He throws hard, 11 wins by knockout. He is the more durable fighter in this matchup. He has never been knocked out, and he's been hit with some bombs before. For Glover, he was hurt in his last fight. Robertson hurt him and had him in trouble and nearly finished him with some nasty elbows. We've seen Glover hurt in multiple fights in the past, and he survives some and not in others. Glover will not have a durability edge here, and he should know that. He should recognize it. That should equate to a takedown heavy attack. And I think Cutelaba might get taken down a couple of times, but look for him to get back up, force Glover to work, and to stay off his back. Now, I would think Glover might eventually get drawn into trading with Ion, whether it be through defensive work or the possibility that Glover makes a poor decision here. Create a brawl, create an exchange. Glover was willing to fucking trade with Rumble Johnson. Who calls out Rumble Johnson and then goes in there and strikes with him and gets knocked out like he did? That's brutal. He's got a lot of pride. He's damn tough, but it can be a mistake. I think ultimately Cutelaba is quicker. He's going to have a little more power, and he's more durable. He's going to catch him. He's going to push him. Cutelaba's, as I said, he's more resilient as well. That will be the difference maker here. We've seen Glover hurt in many fights. I think Cutelaba shucks off the wrestling attempts and has some success here. And ultimately, my prediction is Ion Cutelaba to defeat Glover Teixeira by TKO. And the UFC's done a good job on this card of putting together a good selection of action matchups that should be a lot of fun for however long they last. Another case in point, we're in the UFC's the welterweight division, my apologies, as Cowboy Alex Oliveira, 19-5-1 with 2 contests, takes on Platinum Mike Perry with a current record of 12 wins and 4 losses. Now, Perry's returning after a broken arm, or at least a badly injured arm submission loss he suffered against Donald Cerrone. He has just 1 win in his last 4, which is a split decision win over a lightweight coming in on late notice in Paul Felder. For Oliveira, he suffered a brutal loss to Gunnar Nelson. He took some sizable damage on the mat, got submitted, got busted open. He had won back-to-back in 6 of his last 7 with a no contest mixed in prior to the defeat to Nelson. Now, physically, Oliveira 1 inch taller, he'll have a 5-inch reach advantage. He's a former lightweight who's moved to the welterweight and had a lot of success. Perry is the younger fighter by 3 years. Now, Mike Perry was incredibly hot early in his UFC career, winning 4 of his first 5 matchups, all by knockout. But since he's taken a step up in competition, he's struggled. It's not been kind to him. He lost the Alan Joe Ban matchup in that 4 of 5 stretch, and he has struggled since. A lot of the guys he's beaten are no longer on the UFC roster or are taking sizable step backs in their career. Perry has 11 wins by knockout. The guy's got a lot of power, but he is 1-4 in fights that don't end by KO. 1-3 in decision. So it tells us there's extreme vulnerability here. Perry can be a very effective striker when he can create brawling scenarios, when he can draw his opponents into boxing exchanges and get in that range where he can let his power go. At the same time, he averages 4.02 strikes landed per minute. We're giving up 4.44 strikes absorbed per minute. So he's actually getting hit more often than he's landing. Sometimes that's because in the fights he loses, he really loses them. Other times it's because simply he's willing to trade to try and force his opponent into an exchange that he feels he can win with his power. Now, he has had issues with more technical strikers, guys that utilize a lot of leg kicks, like Santiago Ponzinibbio, like Max Griffin, 2 guys that took him out, or at least won decisions and beat him up in those fights. He had success versus Felder, and I think it's because he was the more impactful striker, being the heavier man, but he also started to slow down in that fight and kind of got away with it, and it was a close fight that he was nearly able to edge out. Now, Oliveira is very aggressive. He has power of his own. He carries a good pace, but he's incredibly loose defensively, and that's concerning. He does his best work in the clinch. He holds his opponent on the cage very effectively. He'll land strikes from there. He'll wear them down, and he will look for takedowns constantly. Now, we have seen Perry taken down. Joe Ban took him down twice. Ponzinibbio took him down 3 times. He's not an easy guy to take down, but it's not impossible. It's certainly not impossible to put him on the mat. I think Oliveira is going to look for that avenue. Oliveira can do damage from top position. He can set up submissions. It's an area Perry has been vulnerable to, especially with the Cerrone fight. I think it was his first career submission loss. We've seen guys have success when they look to be more technical. My major point of concern here is that Oliveira gets drawn into a brawl, gets clipped by Perry at any point in this fight. If Oliveira can clinch him, he will make Perry far less effective as the fight advances. Still dangerous, but not nearly as dangerous. Oliveira has more avenues to victory here, and Perry has struggled against capable opposition of late. He's just not put up good numbers against guys who are on that next level of competition. I think Oliveira's going to use his length to avoid big shots. He's going to land some kicks. He's going to close in for the clinch and tie up Perry, jam him up every time he tries to get in that boxing range. He's going to grind him down, get some takedowns. Perry seems to be a little bit, he gets disinterested when things aren't going his way. Look for Oliveira to get in, get a good spot to set up a potential submission, possibly get to his back. And my prediction is Alex Oliveira to defeat Mike Perry by submission. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's heavyweight division for a matchup that I don't think exactly deserves this spot, but I know why it's here. The returning NFL veteran, the Prince of War, Greg Hardy, with a record of 3 wins and 1 loss, takes on the lifeguard, also returning fighter, Dmitrii Smoliakov, with a current record of 8-2, fighting out of Belarus. And again, if I didn't mention it, we're in the UFC's heavyweight division. Now, Hardy remains a very controversial figure, but he's a name that will draw in casual fans. NFL fans will tune in to watch him fight and see how he does, and he's getting a big spot here in the co-main event against a guy who's winless in the UFC through his first 2 fights. Now, Hardy's coming off that DQ loss to Alan Crowder, the longest fight of his career. He didn't dominate. He had his moments, but he had a mental lapse and landed a knee with his opponent, had 1 knee on the mat, and that cost him. For Smoliakov, he went 0-2 in the UFC, his first 2 pro losses. He took 2 years off, got a first-round win in the regional scene, and immediately got called back. So you know what I'm thinking for this fight. Hardy is a massive heavyweight, 6'5", 3 inches taller than Smoliakov. He'll have a 6-inch reach advantage, and he should be 10 to 12 pounds heavier. He's also the younger man by 6 years, so all of the physical attributes going in the favor of the American. Now, when you look at these 2 guys, a combined 12 first-round finishes. They are also a combined 0-2 outside of the first round, and they have a combined 7 finishes inside the first minute of a fight. So the fight is most likely not going the distance. Hell, it probably won't even get out of the first round. I say that, and it goes the distance is sloppy, but hey, you know what I'm saying based on the numbers. Now, Hardy has traditionally pushed forward, landed big shots, and his opponents have folded. Alan Crowder did not. He was a next-level opponent. He put up a better fight and made it much more interesting and had a lot of success. We saw Hardy start to slow down a little bit. He did recognize he wasn't getting the quick finish and started to conserve some energy and fight more appropriately. He needs to be smart, and he was for the most part, and that nearly got him a victory in a more well-rounded performance. Now, where Crowder had success, he took him down. First time we've ever seen Hardy on his back. He eventually got back up, but it was a bad spot. It was a learning experience, and it was a point of vulnerability that other fighters are going to look at and say, I can do that as well. Now, Hardy has shown signs of a decent striking attack. He's got a decent jab. He'll punch the body. He paces himself. He knows he can't just throw caution to the wind and keep firing and firing and firing until his opponent fades, because it's just not an appropriate way to fight at this level. Crowder had some success as Hardy slowed down a little bit, kind of pressuring him and landed some shots. He also got himself in some trouble that way, and that led to the fight-ending sequence. But still, Hardy's not let her perfect on the feet. Now, for Smoliakov, he is being brought back as essentially, as far as I'm concerned, as a lamb being led to the slaughter. He has a chance to capitalize on a fight here where he would get himself some big notoriety. He's only had one fight since we last seen him, but he's been out 2 years. He was making strides to try and improve. Could that 2 years be what he needs to get himself into a position to be more significant in the UFC? He lost Cyril Asker the last time we saw him, so that tells you a lot. Now, again, cardio has been a major concern for Smoliakov. At times, he appears in the fights we've seen, especially his debut against Henrique that went a little bit further than expected. He was slowing down at the first round. He's very erratic with his... Actually, he was slowing down in the first round. He's very erratic with his techniques, and just... It's not a good way to conserve energy, especially for a big man. Now, how does he win this fight? Again, it's with his wrestling. He's got a background in freestyle wrestling. He needs to put Hardy on his back, work hard, wear him down, and finish him. Conversely, failed takedown attempts could cost him cardio, could cost him position, and could cost him the fight. He better finish Hardy if he gets him down, because if Hardy gets back up, Smoliakov could be so drained that he simply can't respond, and Hardy gets him out of there. On the feet, Dmitrii is incredibly aggressive, lots of short strikes in succession, not overly effective. He's very loose defensively, overextends himself at times, and he's open to getting tagged with shots. And when you get a man of Hardy's power firing one back, it only takes one to get him out of there. I think Hardy uses that first fight, that first loss, as a learning experience. He comes back better here. This is a slightly more appropriate opponent, somebody who doesn't have the cardio to exploit and push him, and is vulnerable defensively. I think Hardy's going to press forward. He's going to put some pressure on him. He's going to land some big shots. He might have to defend the odd desperation takedown. He showed a better sprawl in the later stages against Crowder, which I really liked. Wouldn't be shocked to see Smoliakov end up on his back in this matchup, but eventually Hardy will start unloading unanswered strikes, and my prediction is Greg Hardy to defeat Dmitrii Smoliakov by TKO. And now we move to the main event of the evening. We're in the UFC's middleweight division as former Strikeforce champion Ronaldo Jacare Souza, ranked 4th in the division, 26 wins, 6 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on Jack the Joker Hermansson, ranked 10th in the UFC's middleweight division with a record of 19 wins and 4 defeats. Now, this fight it's gone through some various mutations, if you will. It was originally scheduled to feature Yoel Romero taking on Paulo Costa. We had a lot of issues there. Costa was pulled from the fight. Jacare moved in for a rematch with Romero. Romero pulled out. And then Paulo Costa was actually considered to fill in for Romero to face Jacare as a replacement, but he opted not to. Said he couldn't make weight or something to that degree, didn't have enough time, so Hermansson stepped in. Now, Hermansson comes in this matchup. He has won 3 in a row. He's 6-2 in the UFC. His losses came by submission to Cesar Ferreira and by TKO to current light heavyweight challenger Thiago Santos, and he's beaten some noteworthy guys, including the most recent win against David Branch. He beat Talis Latis. He beat Gerald Mearshart as well. So he's had a good run. For Jacare Souza, he's coming off a knockout victory for Chris Weidman. He was arguably losing that fight. It was very close. Prior to that, he had a split decision loss against Kelvin Gastelum that eventually propelled Gastelum to a title shot. He knocked out Derek Brunson, and then he had that loss to Robert Whittaker that propelled Whittaker to winning the title. Prior to that, he had victories over Tim Boetsch and Vitor Belfort. He had the loss to Romero that kind of ended his streak. All the guys that beat him, Whittaker, Romero, Gastelum, are top caliber guys. So that's what it takes to beat a guy like Jacare. Where does Hermansson fit in that scenario? Now, Jacare said he had won 8 in a row prior to the Romero loss. Did that cost him a shot at the title? Possibly. He seemed to get things back on track before the Whitaker loss. I think that cost him a shot at the title more importantly. And a loss here could absolutely kill his title shot aspirations. It could put an end to any hope that he gets to fight for the title in the future. Physically, both guys 6'1", 5-inch reach advantage for Jack, which is certainly worth noting here. He is the younger man by 9 years. He's also coming to this fight off less than a month turnaround after the Branch fight. He's hot right now. He's striking as quickly as he possibly can. Strike while the iron's hot is what I'm looking to say. And he's getting back in there. 3 fights in 4 months. So very impressive coming into this matchup. Now, on the flip side of that, is it too much too soon? He's faced a nice escalation of opponents with some setbacks mixed in, but is Jacare simply too much for him? Not enough time to prepare for a fighter of this caliber? I don't know. We'll find out. Now, Hermansson's success has been a product of his, I don't want to say newly integrated, but certainly more focus on his ground game and his ground and pound. He does have back-to-back submission victories, but again, his ground and pound, his takedowns have helped to put him in a position to get those wins. Let's get one thing right out of the way. Unless Jack clips Souza and hurts him and goes for a sub, he's not submitting Jacare here. Branch is a good ground fighter. It was just his second submission loss, but Jacare is on another level, and Hermansson's not taking him down and submitting him. Now, as I said, Jack's ability to get on top of opponents and land massive soul-stealing ground and pound has been impressive. It's been violent. It's been almost like, holy shit, man, relax. But he gets guys out of there very quickly with that technique, and that's what has made him successful. He's landed takedowns in all of his UFC wins, and again, he puts his opponents away when he gets that opportunity. But he hasn't faced... Well, he has faced some good ground fighters with mixed results. As I said, Fajeda subbed him with relative ease, which shocked me. I had Hermansson in that matchup. Talis Latis had him in a world of hurt. And in fact, Hermansson got hurt in that fight, but Latis gassed out in the later stages and got finished, but Latis nearly had him submitted in the early stages. Even Mearshart had moments where he had success against Hermansson in the ground exchanges, eventually got put in a bad spot and got finished, got submitted, but we saw he had some success. You look at Jacare, he has 14 wins by submission. He was taken down for the very first time in 12 UFC fights in his last fight by Chris Weidman, taken down one time. And it's not because his takedown defense is rock solid, Gleison Tebow level. It's because he's such a threat on the mat. It's like literally going to the ground with a snake or an alligator or a crocodile. I think his nickname is the alligator, right? It's not a good exchange. Getting a takedown versus dealing with him on the mat's not worth it. So we have to ask ourselves, does this take away Hermansson's greatest weapon? Does this neutralize the thing that Hermansson's been successful with? I think it does. I think Hermansson has become very reliant on that ground game. It's made him very exceptional. It's allowed him to rise through the ranks. But against Jacare, it's not an option here. There could be a level of overconfidence in Jack's ground game, and that could get him in some serious trouble. Offensively, Jacare has taken down 9 of his 12 UFC opponents. And in fact, the 3 opponents he didn't take down, he knocked them out in relatively quick fashion. Or Weidman, it took longer, but still, he knocked them out. Guys he opted to strike with. Jacare has the ability in this fight to take Hermansson down, control him, and submit him, much like Fajeda did, much like Talis Latis had success on the mat with him. So then, if Hermansson can't go to the mat for fear of submissions, how does he win this fight? And it's with striking volume. It's an alteration. It's going back to what I perceived him to be when he first came to the UFC as a striker, a movement guy, a volume guy. Aggressive, put the pace on Jacare. Jacare could slow down, can't take it. He seems to wear damage more and more in recent fights, and he's getting older. His striking is getting better, but again, he wears that damage. He gets beaten up. Weidman hurt him, Romero hurt him, Whitaker TKO'd him. It's there to be had. But is that Hermansson? Has he got away from that? Does he have that ability to put it on him? Does he have the ability to stay vertical long enough to do enough damage? If Jack can turn this into a kickboxing match, he can win it. It won't be easy. Defending takedowns will be a problem. The unwillingness to overcommit on his strikes will be an issue because he's simply afraid of being taken down. And Jacare is a pretty good striker, and he's dangerous. He's got power. We've seen him one-punch guys and put him down. I think ultimately Hermansson's edge that's made him significant, made him successful, is gone. He's not going to land takedowns, and if he does, he's going to get himself in some trouble. He's not out-positioning Jacare on the mat unless he hurts him. If he opts to go striking for the first round and a half and maybe have some success there, he could take advantage of a tired Jacare, but it's going to be an issue. I think this is too much too soon for Jack, and I am a Jack Hermansson fan. I enjoy watching him fight. I like what he's done. I like what he's brought to the table. I like the alterations he's made. But again, I think this is a bad stylistic matchup for him. Short of cracking Jacare and hurting him and putting him on Queer Street and really getting him wobbling around, this is going to be an issue for Jack in this fight. I think Souza takes him down, and my prediction is Jacare Souza to defeat Jack Hermansson by submission. So those are my 6 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC event. Again, I don't know if it's UFC Fight Night, UFC on ESPN 3 or UFC Fight Night 150. I'll have to double check with that. Either way, 6 predictions here for the main card. All of my preliminary picks available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. So please check them out. I'm very much looking forward to this card. It should be a lot of fun, a lot of action fights that are kind of reiterated throughout the show. To say the least, it's a good matchup. I have my bet packs available for sale for $15. You can check those out. I'm looking forward to looking at the odds and really getting, taking a bite out of this card. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. Subscribe to me on YouTube. My videos have been getting fantastic views as far as I'm concerned, even when I get them up late. I used to get them up Monday, Tuesday. Now I'm trending towards Tuesday, Wednesday, which will be this one. But either way, thank you very much for tuning in. Comment, like, subscribe, do all those things that you do on YouTube. I greatly appreciate it. And I will talk to you guys very soon. Again, thanks for tuning in.